Well, tough week, tough couple of months. Maybe not for you, but for me. And I know that I am supposed to stand up here and always be happy and perky and funny and wise, but sometimes, I am discouraged. And lately, I've been discouraged. And sometimes it's worse than others, and last night got a little worse. What is discouragement? Is that an emotion? Is that something we just feel? If it is, it's a complicated feeling. It's got lots of pieces to it, doesn't it? Discouragement, defeat, shame, anger, depression, anxiety, all of those go with feeling discouraged. The sense that what we are trying to do is never going to get accomplished, that our efforts, whatever they may be, are coming to naught. Everybody knows something of discouragement. This is not just me. Everybody knows how that feels. Everybody knows what it can be like. For some people, it goes on a long time in life and can be really tough to live with. It can be an emotion that comes on us sometimes seemingly for no reason, or it can be a response to circumstances. Sometimes it's like trying to learn to play the piano, at least if you're me. I have taken lessons twice as a kid. I have taken lessons as an adult. I have sat down at the piano and I can get so far and no further. How Heidi makes her two hands do different things is a mystery to me. It's discouraging for me to keep trying. Doesn't that sound strange to say? I know what we're supposed to say. Just keep trying. You'll be able to do it if you stick with it long enough. But I get discouraged because I don't seem to make any progress. Or, rooting for a losing team. Anybody here know what that's like? Year after year after year. Well, of course, the question we have to deal with today is whether discouragement is a spiritual condition. Is it something that is the result of a lack of spiritual strength? Should we, as Christians, be immune to discouragement? Or is it something that we're all going to experience as we seek to follow God, to know God? Are we going to find that discouragement is part of that life, that we're just going to find it difficult sometimes? Discouragement has a paralyzing effect. It's an energy sapper. It takes away your vitality. You know how it is when actors want to show discouragement on the stage or on the screen. It's always a head-down look. Because that's what discouragement, it makes it even hard, it seems, to stand up straight. Discouragement is a couch, it's a chair, it's a bed. Lay down, give up, this is too much. And maybe that's even its value to us. Maybe some of us need to come up against discouragement so we'll just stop and lay down for a little while. Some of us work so hard at things and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and we're taking a toll on ourselves. Maybe discouragement is an evolutionary improvement on that it causes us to just stop, at least for a while, to stop and slow down and sit down. It could be that that's so. To say, you know what, I can't do it. I can't do it. And to give up. Yes, that's right. I'm standing up in front of a crowd of people in 2017 saying sometimes you need to give up. Sometimes you do. And though that may be a necessity, it doesn't feel good. Because discouragement makes you feel weak, especially if you work really hard at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Feeling discouraged is a demotivator. It takes away your creativity, your energy. You can't see solutions any longer to the situation. You can't face it. And maybe sometimes when you feel discouraged, you take on a smaller task. Have you ever gone up the stairs and taken a look at that attic that you're going to clean out? Take a look at it, think about it, and then decide to just wipe off the cupboards in the kitchen instead? Because some tasks are just too discouraging to even think about, to get into. Maybe it's a relationship that you don't know if you have the strength to make it turn back to the love that it once had, and we just wipe it clean and go our separate ways. Well, anyhow, I think discouragement is difficult because it's really tightly connected to failure. Discouragement, really, it takes a little time to develop. You need a series of defeats and losses for it to really deeply set in. Enough failures and you're going to feel pretty discouraged about things. You might set out to do something, you might work at it hard for hours or days or years or decades and finally realize you're not making any progress, not moving forward towards your goals at all, that somehow you are just not getting anywhere. And you might plug away at it for a long time, and the longer you plug away at it, the harder it is to admit that you're getting discouraged. And when the discouragement does set in, you can't dislodge it or ignore it anymore because we failed. Failure is a difficult thing to face, and everybody faces it. It hurts everybody one way or another. Have you ever watched a Major League Baseball player strike out and take that bat and go back into the dugout and start smashing things with it because they are so frustrated and angry that they've struck out? And have you ever watched a pickup game in gym class where there is some kid that hasn't the least bit of interest in playing baseball who strikes out and sits back down with relief? At least that's over with. Failure affects different people differently depending on how much you put into it, how important it is to you. So it's not the same thing for everyone, but everyone fails, right? Everyone fails frequently, sometimes spectacularly. The head of the space program during the Apollo flights was famous for his phrase, "Failure is not an option." And when you're putting people out into space, you probably want to have that as a mantra, but guess what? They did fail, didn't they? A couple of times. There was significant failure, spectacular failure, because everybody does. And there are millions of little failures that happen every day. But the most troubling ones are the ones about things that we cared about deeply, that we really wanted to work. Failures in our families, or failures with our workplaces, or failures in our own lives. Those really get to us. And if you get enough of those, discouragement settles in. One of the reasons we get discouraged is because of the stories we hear. Who knows, ever heard of Steve Jobs? Yeah, right. So who was he?
Founder of Apple.
The founder of Apple, exactly right. One of the most powerful men in the world, eventually. Where did he start Apple?
In a garage.
In his garage, right. Steve Jobs started Apple computers in his garage with one other guy, and they worked hard and they kept at it until they built it into one of the most important companies in the world. And why haven't you done that? Now let me ask you this question. You all know that Steve Jobs started a computer company in his garage and built it into one of the world's greatest things. How many of you think that there may have been maybe one or two other people who attempted the same thing and got nowhere? Is it possible? One or two people? Maybe a dozen? Maybe 100? How many people do you think attempted to start a business in their garage that failed? Some of them don't even have a garage, exactly. Millions of people have failed, and how many of you have heard their stories? See? One of the reasons I don't necessarily like going to pastors' conventions is, you know what's going to happen at the pastors' convention? Brittany, you probably know this. They're going to bring out somebody who succeeded despite all odds, and they're going to get up there and tell you how they did it, and they're not going to really say it. But they're going to ask you, so why isn't your church growing? Why haven't you got 600 people a Sunday? We get discouraged because we only hear the stories of the people who had the spectacular successes. But the reality is, failure is where most of us live most of the time. We try, we don't succeed. You know what? I feel like my sermon's getting discouraging. Is it? Okay. So what to do about it? What to do about it? What to do when you are a pastor and you've been doing this kind of work for over 30 years and you turn on the news and find the very sort of thing that you have been working against going on in a massive demonstration? What happens when you have been trying to help someone and you've poured a lot of effort into it and it just doesn't work out? That person doesn't come through for you. They don't blossom like you hope they would. How do you deal with these discouragements? How do you deal with it when that's where you are and that's where I've been? So I'm talking today about how I deal with it. Let me say this. 5 final words about that. First of all, it's okay to be discouraged. It's okay to fail. You are not a sinner or a loser if that's the situation for you. It is okay to be discouraged and it is okay to fail. Is there anyone here who has never failed or ever been discouraged? Okay, so it's unanimous, all right? Don't let it get to you if you are. If you are discouraged, that means this. You're discouraged. That's all it means. You can live with that and you can work with that. Number 2, Jesus himself warns us that there will be failures and difficulties along the way. What was it that Jesus said we have to do if we want to be his followers? We have to give up everything and take up your cross. Jesus could certainly have been pointed out as somebody who failed in the most spectacular way, tried to change the world, and ended up on a cross and in a tomb. You could look at it that way. Jesus understood about failure many times, was rejected, and felt discouraged at times as well. So I want you to keep that in mind. 3, we must not discourage one another. And this is a place where we come for strength. You might have somebody in your life who is always taking a negative approach to things. If you have someone in your life who is constantly discouraging you, you need to think about that relationship and what you can do to change it or minimize it, because we cannot have that in our lives as a constant. If you have someone who is always discouraging, you want to rethink that situation. The Bible can be a voice of encouragement. Now I say can be, because you can go to the Bible and you can read the stories of people who started off with nothing and accomplished great things, and why haven't you done that? Right? Those stories are in there, and I'm not going to pretend that they're not. But there are also other stories as well, and I particularly want to point you to the Psalms, which are written by people who can't understand why, despite the fact that they've tried to follow God, things have fallen apart. And those stories are there too. And look for that. Try to read that. Look for those places of encouragement in the Bible. Oh, I said this one. Watch out for people who discourage you. And let's not do it here within the church. I've been in churches where that is the case, where people are discouraging to each other. I am so glad this is not one of those places. Let's continue to build each other up and lift each other up. You are going to face discouragement in life. You are going to fail, and you are going to fail often, and sometimes you will fail completely. You will hear people telling you not to be discouraged, and sometimes I will be one of those people, but you might be discouraged anyhow. Don't forget this. We are followers of the one who died and rose and will come again. Failure and discouragement are inevitable in life, but discouragement is temporary. It's temporary. What is eternal is the grace of God in Christ. It is without end. It reaches into every dark tomb, every place of failure. The grace of God reaches into every racist protest and every war and battle and every nation and every people everywhere. The grace of God reaches into the very hardest places on this earth, the lowest and darkest of the tombs. The grace of God reaches into there, and it is an eternal and permanent part of your life. And that discouragement that you go through is going to pass, but the love and the grace of Christ is going to stay with you forever and will lift you up and is lifting you up and is lifting me up, and we can thank God for it. God looks at us and sees us as more than we see ourselves. Amen? Amen.
You've been listening to a sermon by Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, we invite you to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning, beginning at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to Steve's sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please take a moment to explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day, and that God's blessings will rest upon you now and always. See you next week.